Think about this. The United States of America preserves more battlefield land related to the American Civil War than the rest of the world combined preserves for all wars ever fought since the beginning of time. Did you all follow that? Why? How? Now, there may be a lot of reasons, and we can talk about some of them as we go along. But certainly one of the reasons is embodied in this monument and the ceremony that attended the dedication of this monument on May 12th, 1909. Think of something else. Nations that are riven by civil war don't put up statues to those who lost the war, except in America. Nations riven by civil war don't have joint reunions on old battlefields, except in America. And these battlefields would play an important role in what by any measure is one of the most astonishing single phenomenon in the history of this country or any country, and that is the reconciliation that took place in the United States of America in the decades after the American Civil War. It's astounding. It's not going to happen in Syria or Libya. I think you can be pretty sure about that. But it happened here. And that happened in part, there are a lot of reasons, but certainly a very important part of the reason is that these men, and indeed these sections, north and south, looked hard for common ground. Sentiments, actions, characteristics that would define them once again as Americans, as brethren, rather than as enemies. And what were those characteristics? The shared experience on the battlefield. The shared devotion to a cause. The courage, the sacrifice, the struggle. That they could agree about. And so they did. And so Civil War battlefields became the dominant expression of the post-war generation toward this effort toward reconciliation. Ironically, these places of conflict became places of reconciliation. We love simplicity. We pursue it, we covet it, we nurture it. These bits of conventional wisdom. Washington cut down a cherry tree, or he couldn't lie. There's many of them. Grant was a butcher. There's a simplicity for you. Lee was noble. Even true, in part, but also a simplicity. And so what I'm suggesting is that when we take these moments, we do nothing generally but view these things, these places, these events through the lens, the small lens, the narrow lens, the front of those binoculars that hopefully are still in the audience somewhere or in someone else's hands. These simplicities become ingrained in our culture. They become embedded in our school curricula. And what happens when you challenge one of these cherished pieces of conventional wisdom? People get mad. There is no place, no piece of American history that has been more carefully shaped, protected, and presented to the American public over time than the American Civil War. I mentioned the quest for reconciliation. But there's also, in this equation, a loser. I don't mean the teenage kind of loser, but one who lost the conflict, the Confederacy. And so there is also a process of redemption in these simplicities. Now, let me take a broader lens In 1902, Adelia Donovan, who was the President General of the United Daughters of the Confederacy, for decades the greatest keeper of Confederate and Civil War memory in America, she spoke to the UDC convention. In this relatively new organization, she laid out its purpose. What lies before us is not only the building of monuments, but the vindication of the men of the Confederacy. The Chief of Heritage Defense of the Sons of Confederate Veterans declared in 2005, we don't need to give visitors an entire history of the antebellum South, so they come away with the idea that one side was the villain. So what is he advocating for? He's not advocating for lying or misrepresenting. He's advocating for the small end of the binoculars. He's advocating for your belt buckles and not the broad view. So they want, and they got. And the National Park Service participated in this for decades. That close, narrow view. And that, in part, is what has set us up for the real great, interesting dilemma that we face today.